Time to get some insight into this year's selection and bracketing process. Joining us is the man who engineered that process, Mark Hollis, the chair of the NCAA Division I Men's Basketball Committee and the athletics director at Michigan State University. So many questions, so little time. My two friends here were steadfast in saying Duke was going to be a #1 seed. They were not. That's the first thing that jumped at us when we first looked at the bracket. What happened?
Well, I think part of the thing is you have to understand the process. And the process is, it doesn't start Sunday morning. It starts on Wednesday. And Duke came in as the top-ranked team on the 4 line. So as you go through the week and they're winning games, 3 games against top 25 teams, and we go into scrubbing, they're working their way up. And they got stopped along the way by a team that won both its regular season and conference tournament, and frankly weren't compared against teams that were on the 1 line.
So that's what struck me, is the fact that they're in the region with Villanova means they're not even the top 2 seeds. So I want to get back to this thing where you talk about winning the regular season in their conference, because you guys are always talking about overall body of work. Duke has 8 losses, North Carolina has 7. They played 3 times. Duke won twice, including once on a neutral court. Duke was better away from home. Duke had the tougher strength of schedule. So overall body of work, it seems pretty definitive that Duke should be ranked ahead of North Carolina, but North Carolina won the regular season ACC. So was that the determining factor?
Yeah, I think when we came into the studio earlier in the week, we were very clear that these are our 4 solid 1 teams, and that included North Carolina at that time. Then when you go through the week and you start doing the scrubbing process and you're working teams up and down the line based upon results, Duke had the largest jump by going 2 lines, going from the 4 line to the 2 line. And as the committee was going through that process, making their votes on the scrubbing process, they got stopped along the way, and they didn't get to a point where they could be compared.
So winning the regular season title in your league is something that is weighing very heavily with you guys, I guess.
Winning your regular season title, but also having the non-conference wins that go with it. And now you got to remember, Duke picked up 3 top 25 wins along the week. That moved them along, but they didn't have that when the initial seed came out.
Did any teams move in that top 4 group? Looking at Oregon particularly, considering what happened with Chris Boucher, could you talk a little bit about how that played out for the Ducks?
Yeah, I think, there were a lot of conversations that were going on amongst both 1 and 2. And that was a consideration. It was on the table, as most injuries are, or players that are not available. But, I think for the most part at the end we came to a conclusion that the 1s were there, nobody came up. Within the 2s, you saw a little bit of shift. Arizona is another team that moved up considerably as the week went along.
Okay, gotcha.
Why no Syracuse?
Syracuse, I think you said it right. As you look at their resume, 2-11 on the road, that became a theme, was both how did you do against teams that are in the tournament and how did you do on the road? And Syracuse had struggles in both of those. Their non-conference schedule wasn't that difficult of a schedule by means, and they still struggled in that non-conference segment as well.
Mark, contentious might be too strong a word. Let's say discussed. What was the most discussed item in producing this bracket? What did the committee talk about the most?
Yeah, I think the most discussed, and when you're talking earlier on, you were talking about upsets and you were talking about teams maybe not being seeded high enough, and that has to do with the competitive nature of this tournament. 20 teams that were either the 1 seed in their conference tournament or a co-champ ended up winning their league tournament. Last year there was 11, this year there's 20. Right. So the competitive nature of this tournament really made it challenging in the seeding process and really made it challenging as we went down into the depths of the bracket. So that was probably the most discussed process that we had, was because of that competitive.
So that clearly compresses the gap between teams and also sets up for what I think will be phenomenal matchups throughout the bracket as we get started.
It really does, and I was watching your eyes, all of you, when you were reading through the brackets, and you were like, wow, this is a big matchup. Wow, this is a big matchup. And that's what you have in here. I've been here this is my 5th year, and fortunately final year on the committee. But by far I can say with 100% certainty, this is the most competitive bracket that I've seen in those 5 years.
You keep using this word scrubbing. Can you explain how that works and what exactly that means?
Right, it's a process, and it's written out and very public and very transparent, but the scrubbing process is once you seed teams, you do head-to-head comparisons in order to move teams up. You can't, or down. You can't just say, let's take these 5 and move them here, or let's compare a team that's on the 4 line with a team that's on the 1 line. they have to be scrubbed and go head-to-head against teams that are above or below them. We do that quite frequently throughout the day, Friday, Saturday, and this morning.
Mark Hollis, congratulations.
Yes,
thank you.
There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of griping this time around. We'll see you in Phoenix.
Oh, it's all
Great to be
fine.
with you
It's
guys.
all good.
All right, we thank Mark for sharing his insight.